The first thing that we are going to do is lay out our skirt patterns and cut out our skirts. So in this picture, the fold is towards the bottom of the screen, and you can see the way that I lay out these pattern pieces. With this pattern in particular, it's very important to pay attention to which pieces are supposed to be cut on the fold and which ones are not. Obviously, if you're using different prints to mix and match with this skirt, you're going to lay it out a little bit differently. But if the entire skirt is out of one fabric, this is how I lay it out. If you are choosing to sew the Shenanigan Skort, this is how I lay out the front pieces with the optional ruffle. Both of these are going to be on the fold. For this skirt and all of them, it's very important to pay attention to directionality in your fabric. This is how I lay out the back pieces of the Shenanigan Skort. Again, you don't have to do it this way, but paying attention to what needs to be cut on the fold and the directionality of your print so you don't end up with a piece upside down is going to be the most important part of this. Next, I'm going to show you how to cut out the half circle skirt. This process is going to be a little bit more involved because first we're going to calculate and then make our template and then cut it out. So first you need a circle skirt calculator. This is the by hand London that I linked in the original information. So you're going to go to this screen and you're going to choose inches or centimeters. I'm going to work in inches, and you want to select the middle half circle skirt. Now certainly you're welcome to experiment with this on your own, but for this purpose we're going to do the half circle skirt. For what we're doing, the length doesn't matter, so you can just pick whatever. And then on the bottom, you need to select your waist measurement and click on the Do the Math button. Once you click the Do the Math button, it will tell you your waist radius, which in this case is 9 3/4 inches. It's also going to tell you the length of fabric that you need. You can ignore that because we're going to adjust that later. It also gives a suggested layout for cutting on the bottom, which you are welcome to follow, or you can do it a couple different ways that we'll look at next.
Okay, so now that we have figured out what our waist radius has to be for a 32-inch waist on a half circle skirt, I'm going to show you how to make a template. And you can do this with a piece of poster board. I just buy pieces of poster board from the dollar store, and you can actually get a couple templates for different sizes out of one piece, or you can tape together pieces of paper. So I'm going to start right here in this corner, and 9 3/4 is what we're measuring. So I'm going to take my measuring tool and I'm going to put a mark at 9 3/4 over here. And I'm going to put a mark at 9 3/4 over here. Now, if you still have a compass from high school geometry, or if you've got a kid in geometry and you want to use that to draw a circle, you sure can. Because basically what we're going to do is we're going to draw the circle from this point to this point. If you don't have that, then what I usually just do is take and I just start drawing a bunch of dots, measuring from the corner out, in this case 9 3/4, or whatever your waist calculation measurement was on your circle skirt calculator that we just did. And depending on your confidence with freehanding this, you can do as many or as few dots as you want. The nice thing is, if you get this template made for yourself and you make it out of something sturdy, you don't ever have to do this part again because you're just going to reuse this every single time. So now that I've got this, I'm just going to kind of fill in, freehand my circle here, or my curve. Probably should have done some more dots there. Okay, now that I've got that, I'm going to cut it out and then we'll cut the fabric. Okay, so I've got my template cut out here, and there's two different ways to fold and cut these half circle skirts. And there's tons of, well, there's probably more than two. There's two different ways that I do it, and there's tons of tutorials out there, but this is probably the easier, faster way, but it's my least favorite way. And mostly that's because, so what I've done is I've taken the fabric and I've folded it back on itself. So here is the selvage, and I'm putting my template right here in the corner. And the problem with this way, the reason that I don't like it as much, is because this is now your waist, and so the angle that your skirt hangs with the fabric is going to be this way. So it's going to be diagonal to the way that the design is printed. So when you cut like this, if you have a directional design, it's going to be at an angle. It's not going to be straight up and down on the front of your skirt. So I don't love it, but if you don't care, or if the design isn't directional, then this is probably the easier way. So like I said, I folded it in half. I've got my template here. When I cut along here, that's going to give me two pieces with this 9 3/4 diameter. So now I have to figure out how long I want my skirt. So I've got it folded, and the longest I could make this is 14.5 inches. If I wanted the skirt longer, I'd have to fold the fabric back. And so I'm not going to cut this, but if I was going to, I would cut along here, and then I'm going to go down 14.5 inches here. And I'm going to go 14.5 inches down here, because that's the length I'm making my skirt. I'm going to mark it here. And then I'm basically going to do the same thing that I did when I made my template. I'm just going to measure 14.5 inches down from my template all the way around my circle. I'm going to draw my dots, connect those dots together, and then that's what I'm going to cut out. So if I was going to cut this piece, I would cut it here. This is already cut. I'm going to cut down the side, and I'm going to cut at 14.5 inches here because it's folded. That's going to give me my two pieces. Okay, so now I'm going to show you my preferred way to cut the circle skirts, and this is why I make my templates out of the poster board. So I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to lay it out flat, and I'm going to start with my template along the top. This allows me to, I think, waste less fabric too. So I'm going to put this, and this is where I'm going to cut. It also allows me to, if I want a fussy cut and I want something very particular in a certain spot on the front of my skirt, I can do that. And then also you can see that the front of my skirt is going to be, the design is going to be up and down as opposed to at an angle. So I lay this out here, and I'm going to take my straight edge, and I'm going to go 14.5 inches down because that's what we're doing. And I just line it up right here with the edge of my template, and I'm going to bring it down here, and it's right next to the selvage. I could scoot that over if I wanted to. So this is one of those places where having the marker comes in handy, and I write on my fabric because you're going to cover it up when you sew. Okay, so 14.5 inches. I'm going to go down the side here, and then a little bit around the corner, but not too far. Hold my template in place, come down here, 14.5 inches. Make sure that it's straight with my little template piece of pie here. Go down, turn the corner a little bit, and then I'm going to trace my curve. You can do this on the back side of your fabric too, but I like to do it on the front because the whole point of doing it this way is to be able to see your placement, and you can't do that if you're on the back side of your fabric. Okay, so now I've got, it's kind of hard to see on here, I'm sorry, but I've got my side curve, and then I've got my waistband curve here, and I've got my other side here. So now I need to complete my bottom hem. So again, we're going to go back to this idea of measuring down 14.5 inches. So I'm going to take my straight edge, and I'm at 14 and a half, 14 and a half, and I'm just going to put a mark there and a mark there. I'm going to do that all the way around the hem, kind of like with making your template. We are going to put as many marks as you feel comfortable, that you feel like you need to get a good curve down here on the bottom. And if the thought of writing on your fabric makes you uncomfortable, I totally understand that. You definitely don't have to do it this way. But I promise that all of these Sharpie marks will be covered up by your seams and your hems. So you are not going to see this later. And if you're working with maybe a piece of fabric, a solid piece or something that you got from Joann's or whatever, you know, try this out, see if it works for you. And then you can get a little bit more confidence to use it with your custom fabric. So now that I've got that marked, I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. So I'm just cutting right along the Sharpie line here, around the curve. And I'm going to go down my straight edge. If you're not confident with your rotary cutter, you could absolutely put your straight edge here if you wanted to cut down your side with your straight edge. Excuse me. And now I am going to freehand my bottom curve. So I'm going to start down here in the corner, and I like to sort of spot my dots. So here's my first dot, and I'm going to kind of guide myself to that. And then here's my next one. And my next one, and this one. Oh, I've got one right there. Can be hard to find them sometimes within the pattern. That one, and then that one, and that one. I'm more than halfway, so I could just fold this in half and cut it the rest of the way if I wanted to. Line that up. And then now I don't have to really freehand it anymore. I can just follow the curve that I've already made. And so now I have one half of my skirt cut out. Oops. One piece of my skirt cut out. So now I have laid my skirt out that the piece that I've already cut. I've laid it now on top of the other fabric, mirror images, although for this it doesn't really matter, but this way it'll be really easy for me to see. And now I'm going to use that as my pattern to cut around it, and now I'm going to have two pieces. Okay, now I've got my two skirt pieces, and very conveniently, we've got our right sides together, so it'll be really easy to sew together as well. Okay, so now we're going to cut out our shorts. I'm using Supplex for this. And the way that I calculate the length of the inseam that I'm going to be cutting on the shorts is I take my final inseam that I want. And then I subtract about 2.5. And where that's coming from is I'm going to get about 2 inches from my cuffs, and I'm going to get about 1 inch from my gusset. And then we have to take seam allowances into account. So I want 6 inches here, so I'm going to do about 3.5 inch inseam, just that there. So that's how I know. I'm using my handy dandy cup here as a fabric weight, or as a pattern weight, because I don't have actual pattern weights. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut this out with my rotary cutter. You could also use scissors if you don't have a rotary cutter. You're going to want to find something to mark your back seam with. Because this is black, I'm just going to use some pins and put them in that back seam. Just don't stab yourself later with them. Just remember that they're there. And then this will help me later when it's time to line up everything. And of course, you don't want to forget to cut out your gusset. I always find little scrap pieces to use, because this piece is a good way to use up the little scraps that come from the alignment of the way that the shorts line up. So for this waistband, we're going to make a 36-inch waistband. It's not a zipper waistband, so it's going to be 6 inches tall, because that's my standard. So I've got it laid out flat and aligned with the bottom of my cutting mat. I'm going to cut my first edge and across at 6 inches. I'm going to go down to the end and do the same thing down here at 36. Make sure I'm 6 inches up and aligned straight. And now I'm just going to make, because this isn't long enough, a couple cuts at 6 inches. That'll give me something to line it up with. And now I've got my 36 by 6 inch waistband. Okay, now we're going to cut out the pieces for a zipper pocket waistband. This is going to be a little different than our regular waistband where we just have one big long strip. So for this one, I make my main waist piece here 8 inches tall. And I'm going to do, the length is going to be our waist measurement, which for this skirt is going to be 32 inches minus 8. And because the extra 8 inches is going to be taken up by the piece that we're going to put the zipper in. So 32 minus 8 is 24, I hope. So I'm down here at 24 inches. Go up and over 8 inches. It's probably not quite long enough. I'm going to measure over here 8 inches as well. I want to be sure this is as straight as I can make it. And I'm going to cut across my piece here so that my first waistband piece is going to be 24 inches long and 8 inches tall. So again, 8 inches tall, the length is going to be your waist measurement minus 8 inches. So that's the first piece that we're going to cut. Just going to set it aside. The second piece is going to be a 10 by 10 square that we're then going to make into a 7 and 3 by 10 piece. So I start, just because I think it's easier, by doing a 10 by 10 square. And I like to make the square and then cut the pieces apart so that the pattern kind of lines up. You're going to lose some of your design when you sew on your zipper, but I mean, again, unless you don't have a main pattern to your design, you'll see when we do this that it does kind of line up, and I think it looks better when the top piece and the bottom piece coordinate a little bit more. So 10, that's right there. And across and over, line that up. And when you cut your 10 by 10 square, you're going to want to cut your 3-inch strip off the bottom of your design. Otherwise, your design will be upside down. So this straight edge is 3 inches wide. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay that on there and cut across here. And so now I've got my pieces cut for my zipper waistband that we will sew in a little bit. So now we're going to do the pockets. I make my pockets 7 by 7. You are absolutely welcome to play with that. And for this print, I'm using a scrap that was from where the flounce was cut out. This is a print that doesn't really lend itself to worrying about placement for the pockets, but there are definitely some prints that I will fussy cut for the pockets. So certainly where you place your pockets is completely up to you. And I am wanting to utilize this scrap, so I'm having to trim the edges. You certainly would be welcome to just go back up to your other print and do the straight edge. But I'm basically just making a 14 by 7 piece to start. And then once it is all squared off, I will cut it in half. And this is one where if you don't have a cutting mat and a straight edge and a rotary blade, you would certainly be welcome to draw out these sizes and cut with your scissors. The nice thing about a lot of these custom fabrics is they are light on the back, and so you can draw that on there if you need to cut it out. All of these edges will be finished, so if they're not perfectly straight, it's not a big deal. Okay, now we're going to cut the cuffs, which is a off-pattern piece, just like the pockets were. This one, though, doesn't have a standard size. So the way that I calculate the cuffs is first I lay my cut shorts out and I look at the length on the bottom here. And for this size, with this length inseam, it's 22 inches. So I'm going to subtract 1 from that. 21, that's how long I'm going to make my cuffs. It's 21 inches. It's going to give your cuffs a little bit smaller opening than the shorts, which is going to help them not ride up. Now, of course, if you don't like that fit, if you want them looser or tighter, you are certainly welcome to adjust that. But in general, that's where I start. I make my cuffs about 4.5 inches tall because I want them to be about 2 inches when I am done sewing them on. Again, that is personal preference, something that you certainly can adjust. So I'm going to start off by cutting a 9-inch tall by 21-inch long strip. I'm over here at 21 because I started that one at 1. Go up and over. I shouldn't need to make extra pieces or extra cuts here like I did for the waistband because this is short enough that my piece will reach. Again, if you don't have the rotary cutter and straight edge, you could certainly draw this out on your fabric and then cut it out with scissors. But again, all of these edges are going to be finished. So if it's not perfect, then that's okay because you're not going to see any of these raw edges. And then I'm going to go up 4.5 inches on my piece. This is just the way that I do it. It's the way that works for me. You could certainly cut them out separately. Excuse me. And then I'm going to go over here using my cutting mat and my ruler to get to 4.5. Oops. And now I've got my 2 cuffs. This is another one where if you want to play with the placement, you sure can. The part that's going to be showing after you fold it in half is the top part. So if there's something in particular that you absolutely want on your cuffs, you want to make your placement so that it runs along up here.